4 in 10 people believe in ghosts. Over a third of people believe intelligent life exists outside of Earth. 43% of people believe demons exist. There are unexplained phenomena happening daily around the globe, and we are here to talk about it. Your portal into UFOs, paranormal, cryptids, the supernatural, the mysterious, the unknown. I see you. This is Beyond the Radar, and this is your host, Humanoid Tom Conway.
Hello, welcome everyone back to Beyond the Radar, your paranormal news program. Broadcasting live from Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'm so happy to be on with everyone. Please leave your comments, questions in the chat. We have a wonderful guest for you today. We'll get to here in a little bit, but thank you for tuning in to wherever you're from. You can view us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble. You can also view us on the Oracle Talk Radio Network app, which connects you to our radio station 24/7. For archives of past shows, search the Oracle Talk Radio Network on your favorite podcasting platform, or become a member on Spreaker or Patreon for access to unheard of episodes, bonus content, and archived episodes. And with that, I actually have to give a little shout out to some new members who have joined, and you would think I would have had it pulled up, but I didn't. So thank you to Julia Rodriguez. Thank you so much for subscribing. Nick, no last name, but that's okay. We don't need that. Janelle Thorpe, thank you again for subscribing this week. Katie Buss, appreciate you. Thank you so much. And Ryan A, just A, I like that. I'm a Tom C guy because people don't get my last name, so that's fine. But Ryan A, thank you again so much for everything and for subscribing to our wonderful Patreon and everything, messaging, comments. Evan, thank you to everybody listening, emailing, all of that stuff, your stories, your sightings, your pictures, all of that kind of stuff. I really feel the love. So thank you again, everybody, for that. So, Beyond the Radar, your paranormal news program. We have a little bit of a different show for you tonight because we have another author. Authors always have a soft spot in my heart, especially being one myself. And we're going to get into what makes this gentleman tick, everything from his experience and his journey. And his name is J.V. Hilliard. I'll go ahead and I'll read his bio. Born of steel, fire, and black wind, J.V. Hilliard was raised as a Highlander in the foothills of a once great mountain chain on the confluence of three mighty rivers that forged the realm's wealth and power for generations. J.V. is a debut author of the epic fantasy book, The Last Keeper, book 1 of the Warminster series. For fans of sword and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons, Tolkien, Game of Thrones, or any particular fantasy adventure tale with crippling action and heart-pounding adventure, they are sure to love this classical series. And as evidenced by one of the many wonderful reviews that JV got, I will just read this quick one. The Last Keeper, Book 1 in J.V. Hilliard's Warminster series, a thrilling fantasy, rich in plot, detail, character, but more than this, it is the beginning of a promising series of gripping adventures. I love that. I love the thought process. I love that it's just book 1 and you have many more to come. So without further ado, I will bring on JV. JV, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. And by the way, what an awesome intro. That thing, if that was the intro to like a TV show somewhere, I would watch every episode of it. That was fantastic. Well done. I really enjoyed watching it.
Thank you. I cut my teeth in IT. So in all of IT, we have to become a graphic designer at some point, whether it's Canva or whether it's Paint. So, and that's however you want to get into that is really, I mean, that's the whole story. Forget the books. We're going to talk about Microsoft Paint for the next hour. So no, but thank you. That really means a lot to me. Thank you. Because as at-home podcast host, show host, all of that, for a lot of us, it's a hobby. And for a lot of us, we put our hard work into it to try to make it look presentable. So I really do appreciate and thank you for that. So I gave a little bio for you. Is there anything you would like to expand on for our guests before we get into the questions?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about my bio because it's a little wonky. I mean, I wrote it in
I love
code,
it. Yeah.
and the way that came about was I was trying to get on a radio show when my first book came out, and the host was like, "Hey, write something very creative, impress me because I get a bunch of the same stuff." And so, as a bio for an author, it's like this is where I went to school, and this is my wife's name, and this is my
Hmm.
my whatever. And so what I did was I cast myself as my own character in the realm of
I love
Warminster,
it.
my own realm, and I wrote it in code. So if you read it, Born of Steel, Fire, and Black Wind, that's Pittsburgh, and Three Mighty Rivers, it's Pittsburgh, and
Yeah.
I went to school Highlander. So if you knew where my high school mascot was or my college mascots were, you could figure me out and just decode me. And I sent that to him, and he didn't have me on the show. He turned me down. He says, "What is this? This is unserious. What am I supposed to do with this?" And I said, "You asked me to be creative. I'm a fantasy author, so I wrote myself as a chronicler of my own realm. If that's not creative enough, I guess I'm not good enough to make the show." And I wasn't, but everybody else likes it. He didn't.
Well, he missed out because reading your website. You didn't talk about my intro. Your website had me hooked from the very beginning
Oh,
too. I
thank
don't know
you.
if you did that or you had somebody else, but
Oh,
here,
I have
wow.
no talent, no talent whatsoever. No talent
Well,
whatsoever.
well done with that one. That is, you will, and everybody listening, whether it's a podcast or here, check the show notes on the archives. I'll put a link to the website, and everybody, if nothing else, go check it out because it is a wonderful website. You have drawings on there, you have speeches on there, you have everything that anybody could want or need to learn about the genre and things like that on there. So, bravo with that.
Well, thank you
Um,
very much.
Absolutely. Um, so let's get into your backstory and writing and all of that.
Sure.
Let's start from the beginning. Who influenced you? Who are your favorite authors? Who did you try to model yourself after?
Well, yeah, I'll answer that in two ways. I mean, I
Okay.
think that I was, my biggest influence was my uncle. He was a Marine. He was paralyzed in war, and I grew up in his bedroom. He was a quadriplegic, and he was like a second father to me. My mother was his nurse, and there was only a few things that he could do. And as a result, his limitations became some form of escapism for him. So he would write stories, and a lot of that during the time was pulp fiction stuff where he would write horror stuff for magazines and short stories and anthologies and such. But I wanted to be him, so I wanted to be a writer, and he kind of inspired me. And the second thing he did was he introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons, which was entirely escapism for him. He can be outside of his own crippled body, and it was a way for him to, also play with me. He couldn't go out and throw a ball, and he couldn't do the things that you would the dads would do. But this was a way that we could interact, and so I learned Dungeons and Dragons and fell in love with the genre. And as a result, a lot of my favorite authors happen to be those who write not just in fantasy. Like Tolkien is like the granddaddy of them all, right? Like he's the
Right.
Rose Bowl of everything that I do. But ultimately, all of the subgenres that have come off of that over the years, like the sword and sorcery, Conan the Barbarian, or the lit RPG stuff where you get like Margaret Rice with Dragonlance or R.A. Salvatore with the Dark Elf trilogy, and of course, nowadays the dark fantasy stuff that's out there from Martin from Game of Thrones, where the good guys don't always win, right? Like, and so I've always really been inspired by new things that the genre brings, but also the classics like Tolkien and maybe Terry Brooks, but also respect those like Brandon Sanderson and sort of the new regime.
Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful answer. And yeah, where the good guys, in terms of a fantasy book, that was the longest trope for a long time was, the good guys would always find a way to win at the end. And then you had such a change come about recently. Let's expand on that a little more. What are your feelings about that? Would you rather be more, conventional or do you not mind dipping your toe in a new realm or a new way to go?
Well, I don't mind, and
Mhm.
I don't have a preference really. Like I write in epic and dark fantasy, and I think it makes it more real, more adult. And I think a lot of us that are hooked to this genre, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or some of the dystopian stuff that's out there, really get hooked as young adults. That advanced young adult at 13, 14, where
Mhm.
you're, and then that carries you through, the into the genre more permanently if you stay liking sci-fi fantasy stuff. That's kind of stuff I like to write. So for me, as you mature, you realize that the good guys don't always win. And, so a Game of Thrones where some of your favorite characters die in the second last episode of the season,
Yeah.
because it's realistic. And as an adult, you're willing to accept that. And I think it makes it a more powerful, more realistic story, especially when it's cloaked in fantasy. Like my realm, the realm of Warminster, or Middle Earth, or in this case, Westeros for
Mhm.
Game of Thrones, you know, it's already like, is the sky blue? Is there gravity? Where's this magical system come from? Explain to me this. And so at least if I can base it in some form of realism, it really makes it more believable for me. I can suspend that level of disbelief to immerse myself into that realm. And that's why I think that it's really cool that it's there. But you know what? Aragorn's the man, Frodo's the man. Like it's hard to break away from that because you want the heroes to succeed. You're cheering for them. But I also believe in writing realistic villains and giving them a shot,
Mhm.
and or a shot at redemption, which I
Yeah.
think a lot of people like. And they could go down the path of Darth Vader and get redeemed, or they cannot and just kind of continue to fall off that cliff, which I think again is more adultish and more realistic.
Absolutely, and that does separate a lot of how you're going to like it is how you view the villain, and I do agree with you. I love a well written, whether it's TV, film, book, doesn't matter. I love a well written villain, and that will ultimately sell me on whether I would like the whole thing overall. Because you know what, you can write somebody evil just for the sake of evil. All right, here he comes and he shoots puppies and kittens, and that's that. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
uninspired. Um, it's lazy. You know what I mean? And we have to find out what makes them tick because they need to have just as much backstory as the hero if you're going to do it that way. You know what I mean? You need to have that. And when you mentioned Darth Vader, that's a perfect point. He's one of my favorite villains. He's one of my favorite villains because his character is portrayed so well, and he's so there's a level of honor in of the evil. Other characters, from other shows and movies and books, they might not have that. You know what I mean? So if you have a certain code, where he's fighting say somebody's fighting a hero, let's just take it first. They're fighting a hero, they're shooting out. A woman has a baby in a carrier. He like lets them walk by, stop shooting, and then continues to fire back. You know what I mean? Like that's the level that I was like, I'm kind of looking for. So I'm really glad you picked up on that. It's a wonderful uh, wonderful idea, and I'm even more interested to read your book now after
Oh,
you put that out there. Let's go into some real life experiences. We as writers sometimes do put some more than others, you know what I mean, ourselves into and experiences into our writing. Have you done that, and how much have you done if you have?
I absolutely have.
Okay.
From the tippy top all the way down to some things that might seem irrelevant to folks. I've always tried to memorialize things that have happened to me in real life in my novels because, again, it bases it in some form of reality. So, my day job up until I became an author was as a defense lobbyist. I did a lot of work in DC, and as a result, my geopolitical scenes within my books, I think, come off as very real. The historical battle scenes that, as a amateur military historian, that I've been able to kind of embed, into the novels, or struggles that I've had personally or my family has had personally. These are things that people can identify with, right? And so
Hmm.
as a result, you bake them into a good novel, and you even though, like you said before, you might not like the villain, you might be able to cheer for a certain villain because they're kind of like you. There's something about them that appeals to you as part of that. So for me, I've taken a lot of the real life stories I've lifted out of American politics and international affairs, and just reskinned them in a way where they're unrecognizable to reality, but they're familiar. And I think that allows, that connectivity to the reader. They see something and they're like, oh, I can see how this is going to go down. I see what's going to happen before it happens. But also I think, and more importantly to the kind of stuff I'm doing, I've had some weird paranormal things in my life that I can't, and I'm a very rational guy.
Hmm.
I can't that I can't explain. And so the way that I dealt with them, especially when I was younger, was I wrote about them. And when I revisited them before I wrote my first novel, uh, with a little tweaking and massaging and some editing, what was very visceral and what was very emotional was something that then could be part of my stories. And so, the Warminster Saga, the four-book series, has that sprinkled into it in a lot of different ways, and most folks may not even recognize it, but I do. And it was a way for me to deal with it when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and now it's like something that's really come to life in the story. Just like I said, reshapen in a way that no one's going to recognize it from my real life.
Well, wonderful. And to reset this, we're talking here with J.V. Hilliard, author of The Last Keeper, book one of the Warminster series. I see a lot of you, 40 some people are watching right now. I don't know why on my screen says three, but please, if you have any questions or comments, please post them. I'm sure JV will have any advice or answers. And, whenever I've had authors on here before, you usually have somebody asking, who might want to write, a book and just haven't gotten that ball across the finish line. So hopefully we'll have a question like that. If not, we can come back to it too later. But you were talking about paranormal experiences in your real life and being a rational guy. That's that's something that I've found throughout my journey in doing this and talking to numerous people from full time, like that's their job is paranormal investigators, to exorcists, to things like that. And, there's a core belief down there of I'm not going to try to prove to you this paranormal thing is a ghost, a demon, or whatever. I'm just telling you I can't explain it. So I loved how you explained that, hey, I'm a rational guy, but hey, I can't explain it. That's the right mentality to come with. Any of those experiences have you put, into your book yet?
Oh, of course,
Okay.
so for me, the main character in my novel is a character named Damus Alaric, and Damus, in some respects, is a reflection of me as a late teen, early 20 something guy.
Okay.
He was, Damus is cast, and he has this power of prophecy. He can see into the future, and the whole concept of the last keepers. He's the last of his kind, known as the keepers of this forbidden knowledge that can see the return of a fallen king, kind of like my Voldemort or my Darth Vader coming back to take revenge on his sect.
Yeah.
And he sees this in his dreams, and that my dreamscape as 16, 17 through early 20s, I had a recurring set of nightmares that were based on a fallen angel, someone who claimed to be my guardian angel coming back to me to try to help me. And when I didn't listen to this angel, he attacked me in my dreams, and then he tried to apologize for it. And it wasn't the same dream over and over again. It would pick up where the last one left off. And so what I did was I took that experience, which was, as a 16-year-old, 6'2", 240-pound defenseman that played hockey, I shouldn't be scared of my dreams when I'm 17, 18, 19 years old. But I'm telling you, I woke up in cold sweats, you lose sleep the rest of the night. There was such a reality to it.
Yeah.
And he was telling me to call a phone number that I've never to this day called because I'm afraid to call it. I've never looked it up. I don't want to know. People have begged me to give it to them. I won't do it.
Wow.
And then there are other things, that have, that popped up that just are just too real. So I took some of that fear that I had, and I said, you know what? I could scare people with that. If it scared me, it's going to scare other people. And I put that into Damus, and I let him go. And so the first scene in The Last Keeper is him walking through this field of fog and arriving at this placid lake and seeing a man walking across the water to talk to him. And it's the exact same thing that happened to me. And then moreover, I've, my, you mentioned, sort of like ghost hunts and things like that before. And I've, been around the periphery of those things. I've never led them, but everybody's done a Ouija board thing or
Mhm.
whatever. But my uncle and aunt literally lived in a graveyard. Like that's, and my cousin then moved out. He also lives in a graveyard. And I would hear stories about that all the
Yeah.
time. And when I would sleep over, there would be always weird things that happened. And I would not have believed it if I weren't there for it. But my aunt and my cousin swears that there was this ghost that lived in their attic, and they went up and they recorded it on electronic voice phenomenon. And there was the only two people in the house. They were both women, and my aunt asked my cousin about, is that the box that has the Christmas stuff in it? And you know, clear as a bell, a man's voice calls back and says, "No, it isn't." Right? And it's like there was no one there. I know my uncle's voice. I know my other cousin's voice. That wasn't his. There's no one else in the house, and you'd hear that, and it just you're like that can't that didn't just happen, right? And it was an intelligent response, man. It wasn't like you just picked up some white noise on the radio or it was from the TV downstairs. I mean, the place is entirely, quiet. They're doing their own amateur ghost hunt, and they record it, and it's just there, and and they're not the lying type. It was like, and it just you hear it back, and it just gives you chills, And so we've had, that my cousin's daughter, when she was younger, claimed that she saw a man in a blue suit on a white horse all the time. His name was Billy, and he would come visit her at night. And at first, you're like, okay, it's a imaginary friend or whatever. And it turns out that after a little bit of investigation, that graveyard, there was a small, not a battle, but sort of like a skirmish or a melee in the Civil War that's literally 300-400 feet from their house where it happened. And one of the soldiers was a Union soldier who's a cavalryman whose first name was William. And the gravestone is staring you right in the face. And you're like, that, how does a 2-year-old, how's a 4-year-old, how do they, no. And it just, so those kind of things are so cool and so spine rippling that I make overtures of them in my novels too. So you'll see that throughout, because as a dark fantasy author, you want to scare people. I want to embed the gothic in it, and I think a lot of that stuff, those real life experiences, whether it was my dreamscape or whether it was that ghost hunt or those really chilling ghost stories, that motivates people, and I think people will continue to turn the pages. So I take some of those real life experiences and embed them in the story.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, first of all, hey Joe, good to see you. Give us a share and a like. Good to see you around, Joe. But yeah, it's wildly common thought in the paranormal realm where children have the veil is a lot thinner for children, or as you're very close to death, the very end of the spectrums of life. So it's very possible, she saw something we have conditioned ourselves out of by being a more analytical mind. You go to school, you go to, all that kind of stuff. So that's very possible. But the dreams, I'm telling you, there's something about sleep that does scare, and the fear that you get, because I've had awful dreams like that. I've had the sleep paralysis. I've had things like that. The fear you get is completely different than if there was like a big dog off a leash and it's foaming at the mouth, right? You know what I mean? It's a completely different type of fear that is all inside, and it's not a reactionary like adrenaline fear. You know what I mean? It's completely different.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's very sad. Hey Nicole, how are you doing? Good to see you. And glad that you marked yourself safe from the fires out in California. I saw that. Thank you again, Nicole. And yeah, good to see you. Thank you for the share, Joe. We're talking to J.V. Hilliard, author of the epic fantasy book, The Last Keeper, book 1 of the Warminster series. And sorry about that, JV, because you'll hear that a lot as people come in and out.
It's all right. You got to welcome them, man. I'd rather them be there than not.
That's true. That's true. So I've written a couple screenplays. I just wanted, and I saw one of your questions here, so I have to get into this one. If your book becomes a movie, what actor or actress would you want to play your main character?
So that's a good question. It would depend. So I think that if you ask that question of my wife, of course, her and her friends have already carved out every hot guy in Hollywood that would play all these characters, even though they don't make sense. I think that for the villain, I would love to have Charles Dance, the guy that played Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones. His voice and that thing, and of course, Grey Taurus the Mad, the villain, is he's sickly, aged, but powerful. And and there's reasons for his curse that have made him older than he actually is. And I think Dance would be a perfect guy to play that role, to play the other one of the other villains, Dragish von Lormar. I would like the guy who played the Kurgan in the original Highlander. That deep voice, that intimidating look. And I forget his name right now, but he's somebody for me that I think would be perfectly cast for that. And then I would think that maybe Anya Scott Anya Taylor Scott,
Joy.
whatever her name. There you go. Thank you. That
Yeah.
one might be perfect for Princess Adeline. I mean, she's got the same kind of features and kind of looks the part. And after I saw her in Furiosa, oh yeah, yeah, I think she would
Yeah.
do well because up until that I wasn't sure she was a action kind of person, and I saw that I was like, yeah, she's good. She's good to go. Two thumbs up there. So
That's
I think it
true.
would be I think it would be them.
The great analysis from that one. That's true. I mean, she could do the dark and the weird. We've seen The Witch. She did a great job in that. But
Yeah,
the
great.
action part, yeah, the action part, you're right. Oh, thank you, Nicole. We have a question here in the chat for you. Writer's block. We all have it. We all know it. How do you overcome it?
So my writer's block actually happens to me before I start writing. So I've written four now. My series is, my first series is done and published and out and
Okay.
I'm writing three novels as right now for that will be a lead up to the next trilogy that comes out in 2026. But my writer's block always happens before I start to write the book. And in part, I think it's because I'm such a planner that I have to have an outline. It looks like a NCAA March Madness thing on my whiteboard and my like with all these plot lines
This
and
over
character arcs
here, and
all
then
coming together, ridiculous, right? But I do it, and so I will struggle in the beginning, and I'll be like, "Oh, well, how's this end? How do I get here?" Where other authors could just start writing, and they're like, "I don't know where it's going to go. We'll find out. We'll just start writing." I can't do that. That freezes. If you're talking writer's block, that's where I get writer's block. So the way I overcome it is simpler than you think. I talk to a bunch of creatives. I ask them. And it doesn't have to be other writers. It could be a potter. It could be a painter. It could be someone that plays Dungeons and Dragons.
wow.
Somebody that I trust that
Hmm.
understands a good story or will iterate with me and then throw out ideas and say, well, what about this and what about that? And what I found for me really is I'm in a handful of writers groups. In those writers groups, as you're editing someone's stuff and they're editing yours, they will often come back with, well, why didn't this happen? Or I thought this was going to happen. And then you realize that their story is better than the one you wrote, and you go back and edit it. Right. And so for me, I find that talking and socializing the problems with other creatives, not necessarily authors, but sometimes authors, will help you get over that hump because they are just as creative as you. And two brains are more powerful than one. So if you get a handful of beta readers or my Dungeons and Dragons group on Sunday nights, I think those are the places I go to kind of break that writer's block.
Gotcha. So would you say it's a fair statement that you're asking the creatives that might not be writers, because they'll give you general ideas and then you'll be able to connect the dots yourself.
Right.
Whereas if you ask a writer, it might be too hyper specific and not really, it'll be too specific to one thing.
Yeah, and they're going to want to go through some formulaic. Well, what happens next, and I don't even care. It's more like
Okay.
here's and you're exactly right, and I
Yeah,
think
okay.
that's why the people that aren't worried about how the form and function is going to look
Hmm.
take that part out, and like you said, hyper focused on it. Instead, it's just like, hey, I'm going to tell you the beginning part of this story, and this is where it's stuck. Where do you think it should go? And let you get two or three opinions like that, and find out
Yeah.
where it heads. And I liken it to going to a sort of a movie premiere where they bring in a survey group and they put them in three different movies and they show them three different endings and then they vote to see which ones they think are the best. I mean, that's this you're basically trying to do the same thing, right? You try to put out
Yeah.
the best product you can, and in part that comes from that socialization, and they'll tell you, oh, this is a better ending, or I really like the way this ends better. And it might not be the way that I wanted it to end, but that's okay. I mean, you want to
Mhm.
write the best story you possibly can.
Absolutely. A great way to put that out there. Because you're right. They want to see what will sell better. You know what I mean? And even if it's not the most accurate way to have the ending, You know what I mean? Or the most fun way to have the ending, you have to go with that. And that's why many DVDs for years had alternate endings because they'll just put
Right?
them on the DVD, and then there you can pick whatever one you want. I don't care.
You're showing
Uh,
your age, my friend, with the
I,
DVD
I
stuff.
absolutely am. Yeah,
If you went back
DVD.
to like Betamax or VHS, at that point I was going like, whoa, but
Yeah.
at least you're at DVD level. We're good.
Well,
I
yeah.
still have some of those floating around somewhere too.
The stores around me actually started pulling off the physical medias off the shelves, the Best Buys and things like that. So it's definitely going away. Even now, there's programs you can like send your DVDs in, and they'll make it into an online movie. Nicole, I understand, a little bit older than us. You do miss VHS.
How
Um,
can you miss
I
VHS?
People don't know VHS unless they use the Canva filter on their video. That's
Oh,
really it.
I mean, there is an advantage. The VHS thing, there is some sort of classic modicum to it where you're able to, like, where the DVD stuff, you skip cells or you skip 10x and 4x as opposed to I'm just going to rewind to 30 seconds to get what I want to see. And so
And you're never
I
right
do
on the
miss
first
that.
try.
I do miss that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're never right when you did it. You're like, "All right, it's only gonna be a little bit." And then
Yeah.
you're never right.
Never
You
right.
way
Never right.
way overshot the mark. We'll bring back VHS and Blockbuster and all that kind of stuff. But Nicole is a nonfiction writer, and is up to, I believe, 21 books now about
Oh,
hauntings in
congratulations.
California. So definitely a good writer in her own right. Southern California, but away from the fire. So again, and safety to everybody out there who's dealing with that. Um, in terms, was it your lifelong love is why you started writing in this genre, or was there another reason?
Uh, well, I knew if I were ever going to write, this would probably be the genre for me.
Okay.
I always knew that. In me somewhere, I've got a vampire novel. I already have the name
You
for it. I know I'm
feel
going to
it.
write it, but I've been afraid to write it because I want to be a better writer when I get there. So, like on book 10, then I'm going to do the vampire novel and kind of jump from
Okay.
fantasy to horror for just a little bit because I know that that's in me. But I've been writing every day as someone that does lobbying. I do grant writing, I do procurement, I do position papers, policy papers. I've written legislation, so I
Mhm.
write every day. So it's kind of habitual. And for me, that part was never the issue. It was just that's the boring day to day life, and you never have fun doing that. That's work, right? And then COVID happened, and when
Mhm.
COVID happened, it allowed me to, my wife looked at me and she was like, "Man, you're going to drive me nuts. You're too high energy. If we're going to be, alone in this house for however long we're going to be, you got to do something." And so I was like, "All right, well, I'll write my first book and kick that off the bucket list." And then it turned into getting it published, and then a series, and then everything else has come after that. So, for me, I knew I always wanted to do it, and I knew that fantasy would be the easiest transition for me because I loved it so much. But there is a vampire novel coming. Don't worry about that. I got that one covered.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we'll have to stay tuned for the vampire novel.
yeah.
I knew this question, or I was fairly certain this question would come up, but how do you feel about the AI thing now that can almost take writers out?
There's good and bad, right?
Okay.
The good is a lot of this helps you with editing and grammar and stuff like that, which is very expensive for writers, especially if you're indie. You have to go out and get your own editors and stuff like that. Thankfully, I'm published, but I use my own independent editor to do
Hmm.
stuff before I go to my publishing house
Yeah.
with anything. It goes through a development editor that's looking for plot holes. It goes through a copy line editor who's looking for grammar problems and spelling and syntax and this comma's outside of this and it has to be inside. And then it goes through a final editor before it gets to even my publisher, who then edits it on her own anyway.
Hmm.
So for me, AI helps there, and it also helps you. It's giving you a bump to get you a bit of a start. Where I think it crosses the line and where it's really bad is it's basically plagiarism, right? The
Yeah.
AI is not writing it for you. AI is going out, scraping all this information together, stealing something from someone else, and
Hmm.
then giving you a story to write, right? And then you have to go in and kind of put it in um, your own framework. Every writer has their own tone,
Yeah.
and my tone is different than others, and it's identifiable. And you can tell when I've not written something and someone else has written it for me. And that's the problem with AI. It's just there's no life in it yet. And when you read it, it's hiccupy. And of course, now you have reverse AI detectors that'll
Yep.
tell you that this is 85% written by AI. And that's not good anyway. You don't want to be a plagiarist. It's the worst thing you can be as a writer. But I will say this: I talked to a very famous writer when I was at one of my my conventions, and he said that he asked AI to write a book for him in his own voice, because he was famous enough that it could go out and just
Wow.
scrape through his
Yeah.
own work. And he said it came back and it was pretty good. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not there yet. Maybe
Yeah.
when I get the book 30 or 40, I can do that. But for now, I think there's some good and bad. If I used it to put the copy on my website, I don't think that's a problem. Or developing something from a blurb that I can stick on the back of my book to help sell something. I mean, we use
Yeah.
word clouds, we use lots of things that tip us off anyway. So this is just one more tool for it. But if I was using it and I just got it, and it's like, here's my book, and I spent a half a day editing all this other people's work, I think that's unfair, and I think that'll come back and bite people in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen books so much so is I asked AI to write this book, and it was a book that I saw. You know what I mean? And it's like, all right, hey, hopefully it sells well. But I think that's fascinating about your writer friend who he has enough out there that it took his own tone. If I were to do that, it would say who.
Yeah. You and me both, brother. So like, hey, I get you.
Who's that? Oh man. And then that would start the war of AI and me, not all this other Terminator stuff, but that
Yeah,
would
fair
be,
enough. Fair enough.
that would be it.
Yeah.
Um let's okay. This will be a good character development question. If you could spend a day with one of your characters, who would it be and why?
Um, so that's a bit of a cheat for me. So I'll answer that in
Okay.
two different ways. The first is Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer, and Sir Ritter used to be my D&D character. So it was basically I already played him, so it's easy
Yeah.
for me. I already know who that is, and I was him just playing an Elven Ranger. So it was like very easy for me to kind of translate into, and I think it'd be cool to give him a high five and go have some
Yeah.
venison with him,
I made you.
and go on a hunt. Yeah, it's like, so what's up? My alter ego, the Aragorn version of me. But the other problem is my alter ego is his nemesis, this Incanus Druwaith, who is an assassin
Mhm.
who's coming after Ritter's love interest. There's my stories have a bit of a romance aspect to it. It's romantasy, and it's the fantasy romance pushed
Romance.
together.
Okay.
Romantasy, and of course Ritter and Canis are at odds through the first series at one another in a real sort of like adversarial arch enemy kind of way. And he is so despotic and so evil, but there's clues as you read them as to why that happens. And I would want to go back and say, when that thing happened, when that event happened to you and you chose one path instead of the other, the lunch that I want to have with them is I want Incanus to explain to me why he chose the wrong path, even though I set him down that path. I'm the writer, so it's like I already knew where I was going to put him, but I want him my out of body experience, this element that I've created out there, to tell me why he did it. Because I think that would be a lot of fun. And I think those two sitting across the table having a honest conversation with one another as opposed to fighting one another. And maybe that's my evil Spock thing that happened with me, where like I just took this really cool Aragorn, Strider kind of character, and then flipped him and created his alter ego, and that's the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, from me, and I get to fight them against one another in the big battle scenes in my books. So I would say one of the two of those.
Very good answer. I love that. We got Nicole again. Good question. Do you carry notebooks with you in case you got ideas for future books?
I do. So when I'm in the car, it's a cheat. I have my phone and I get data on
Oh,
the
voice
phone,
memo?
right? Yeah. So that way
Cool.
I can
Yeah.
just take notes on the phone, and that way I'm never not. I always have something to record something on, and it doesn't have to be thoughts. Like if I'm driving, I do a lot of traveling.
Mhm.
and on the road and you see a cool name for a town, or you see a cool building somewhere and you take a picture of it. Like those kind of things you can embed in there. So for me, no, I do have a notebook that was given to me by a brewery where I did a book signing, and it was called Illusion Brewery. Cool name. And the book club that was there had 30 or 40 people in it, and they all got together a couple of times a month, drank some stuff, and read a bunch of nerd books. And
Yeah.
so and that my gift for coming up was they gave me this really cool book that had illusion, and it was like something they must give to all authors. So they had a bunch of these little notebook things made, and I love it. So I use that as if I'm sitting there and I have to write something down, I will do that in that book. I have that book, and that's where that goes. But then I cobble things together when I'm driving on dictation and then pictures in the phone.
Very good. Yes, that's wonderful. I have used the voice memo too. Being in the car, I don't know about you, but sometimes my best ideas come from just in the car driving.
Oh yeah.
Something will get the gear turning, and then I've started using the voice memo because I'll wait till I get home. You know what I mean? For some reason, when you wait, you either don't remember it or it doesn't. You can't fully get back that emotion of why it was a good idea.
Yeah, it doesn't
Why it
resonate
was.
as well.
It.
Yep.
You're right. You're right. And so, you have to almost capture it in that moment because you'll probably talk yourself out of it, type of things.
100%.
Yeah. And Nicole uses her phone's notes as well. But yeah,
Nice.
I mentioned my IT background. I still right here next to me have paper and a pen and write the things down.
Old school, right next to your DVD collection.
You're right next to the DVD collection. I mean, it should have gave it away. I got I got an alien with a headphone, but I got X-Files here, and I got a framed fake poster from The Simpsons. So that's where I live. Mid '80s to 2000. That's my bread and butter. So
There you go.
when everyone watching Beyond the Radar, you'll probably get a lesson in that. I quote the movie Tremors on a daily basis, so it's just
There you go. Yeah, there's a deep cut for you.
Deep cut, yeah. Rest in peace, Fred Ward. Kevin Bacon's still alive though. 80s rules. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure you remember more of the 80s than I do. I was born then, but still, what was in the mid late 80s when you become of consciousness as 8, 9, 10 years old, and then you remember your life. That's what was being shown to us. But honestly, thank you so much for coming on, JV. This has been a wonderful show. I thank you so much. I want you to take the time now to promote your books, promote your website, anything you want to promote. The time is yours.
Yeah, sure. First of all, again, thank you very much for having me on. This time,
My
I just
pleasure.
looked up and I realized that we were up against the time, and I didn't. This felt like 10 minutes, and it was
It
45.
really did.
So,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Secondly, to take you up on your offer, I'm very easy to find. Just Google J.V. Hilliard or Warminster Saga, and if you want to buy paperback, download an ebook, audiobook, it's in all those formats. You could find it in the places where you want to shop. So if you're an Amazon shopper, I'm there. Audible, you can download it, iTunes, or if you want to go to Dragon Moon Press, who is my author or my publisher, check me out there. jvhilliard.com takes you to my website, and at JV Hilliard Books takes you to all of my social media stuff. Follow me there, get updates, sign up for my newsletter on my website, and you'll be able to check out the next rung of books that's coming out. Warminster Saga 4-book quadrilogy is done. Last of the 4 was out this past September. First 2 are Amazon bestsellers, so if you like that, check that out. And stay tuned. In 2026, there's going to be a graphic novel adaptation. So for you comic book nerds out there that like to read graphic novels as opposed to 500 page epic fantasy novels, it's coming. Just wait for it. It'll be out in 2026. So check it out then.
Well, you heard him, everyone. I'll put links in show notes to the podcast version of this show, and everybody check out JV. And I can't wait to check out your books as well. Again, thank you, and thank you to everybody listening to where you were from. You could have viewed us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Rumble. Please subscribe to Beyond the Radar's Facebook page, the Oracle Talk Radio Network's Facebook page, for all of our news. And for special episodes, please check out our Patreon or at the Oracle Talk Radio Network. Thank you again, everyone. You have a great weekend. JV, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks again.